Hopefully this will be all good.
Just to say hello, David. Nice to see you. Brought your passport with to come back to Manchester.
Are you talking to me, David? Are you talking to...
No, it's talking to David Kennedy.
Okay.
Good to see you, Ian.
Don't worry, that's fine. Right. Okie dokie. So we are going to get started. If we can do anyway. We'll just figure out how to do this. Turn that on silent. So, where's it gone back? Let's go back to meeting, please. Okay, meeting. Right. So this week we are doing the 15th century from the 14 to the 1500s. Last week, we very much looked at the fleeing from Germany, then they went to Spain, although at the very end of last week's year, we got to 1391, and we had the beginning of the terrible persecutions in Spain. Everybody thinks of 1492, which we will get to the end of this year. But 1492 was the culmination. That was when Jews were forcibly evicted from all of the territory under Ferdinand and Isabella to terrible people. But the persecution began in 1391 with a series of pogroms where 50,000 Jews across 7 communities in Spain were murdered. Between them and the violence that then took place in 1412, Spanish Jewry had mostly quit. But I say the word quit rather than left, because the major problem that happened in the first decade of the 15th century was the fact that the Jews in Spain, rightly, wrongly, it was not rightly, wrongly, not for us to judge, gave up. And a lot of them apostatized. And in fact, the leaders of the Inquisition later on, by the time we get to the end of the century, had Jewish blood within them. If anybody knows anything about the rise of communism, well, no, you have exactly the same thing. It was the Jews who implemented communism. But here we have grandchildren of conversos, the other name Marranos. Just before we go any further, an important point. Marrano is a Spanish word, which means pig. The Jews then preferred to call themselves conversos, or in rabbinic language, we call them the anusim. They were the forced ones because they were forced to make this choice, which none of us have ever had to do. So using the word Marrano, it's very much a derogatory term, and we really should teach ourselves not to do it. But at the beginning of the 15th century, the Jews are fleeing from Germany, but this time they're going towards Poland. They're going in a different direction. Last time they were going southwards towards Spain. Spain is not brilliant, so now they're moving eastwards. And this is, to call it the beginning is wrong, but it's a major step in the uprise and the establishment of Eastern European Jewry. They were definitely there a long time beforehand. Poland, Jews had been in Poland from the turn of the millennia, from the beginning of the 11th century onwards. There were Jews in Poland. There were Jews in Italy, France, and Germany already from the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. In fact, we learned about it when we did of the beginning of the Crusades from the 12th century, when the Jewish community in Mainz was destroyed. The rabbis then, and many of them said, this was a punishment because of the response of the Jews to Ezra. Ezra is the leader that takes the Jewish people back after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, and we're talking about the year 570 BCE. And the Jews in Germany replied to Ezra, say, "You've got your Jerusalem, we've got our Jerusalem." So we were here in Germany and Spain. So the next time somebody turns around to you as a Jew and tells you to go back where you've come from, you can remind them that the indigenous European is very much Jewish. The Poles at the time of the Second World War in 1940, the group of people that had been the longest in Poland were Jews. But until this point, so we're now halfway through this millennium, in the beginning of the 15th century is when they get a real uptake, they get a real invigoration because of the troubles in Germany. So they move further east, and because their previous safe haven, Spain, was no longer really open to them, so they move along to Poland. And we got a number of rabbis that we just want to pull out. Sorry, I've left my book, just a second. I'll get the book. Why on earth I've not brought it in, I do not know. We're showing in the red one that says we're showing him. Thank you. So it's just that for the last half hour or so before we started the shir, there was a rabbis gathering together, just paying tribute to Chief Rabbi Sachs from a rabbinical perspective. So I was on that for the last half an hour whilst I was preparing. So I'd left my books next door. There was a bit of a, I'm not saying funny, but one of those strange moments. I logged on. By the time I logged on, I was a minute late, and when I logged on to it, the screen, wide screen, what was on there? Chief Rabbi Sachs speaking, and you get taken aback. It was a recording from when he spoke to us on a pre-Rosh Hashanah conference. So 2 months ago, this was less than 2 months ago. This was a recording from him speaking there, and I logged on. Obviously, if you logged on time, they said we were not. I'm guessing it, but the first thing I saw on my screen was him speaking, and it was a pretty much of a whoa moment. So forgive me, just slightly.
How did he look?
Pardon?
How did he look at the time?
Perfect. That was a shock. Perfectly all right. That was it. I mean, he was not well, and he'd been. We already knew he was, but he was. Nobody had any. Well, maybe some more in the closer. I think he knew because he was asked a question not long later. His last known public recording, he was asked a question by by somebody about why do bad things happen to good people. A question he'd refused to answer to the same person when her father asked and when her mother asked, and now he was asked it the third time. He gave an answer about it, and it was obvious. Looking back now, he knew what was coming. From the answer he gave, which I speak about later on.
Amen.
So we have Rabbi Sar Shalom of Neustadt in Vienna. Their community was destroyed in 1421, but here we have a community moving along. And another person, just want to speak for a moment, is Rabbi Yontef Lippmann Mauthausen. He was the chief rabbi of Prague, arrested in 1399, and they're all trying to find places that they can go along to. Just let me pull out to make sure I've got the right one here. And my apologies, this is very unprofessional. I normally have the books right up there beforehand, but as I said, I just got slightly my apologies. I'm just slightly.
Don't apologise, Rabbi. Please.
Slightly off kilter. You're very sweet, but Nachi said I do have to apologise. She's listening in.
Oh, Nachi said that's different. I didn't know it was
Nachi. She knows that, but I just give me all of my notes. I'm sorry, just where is it? Yontef Lippmann. Sorry, 164. Sorry. Problem is, there's so much information. He's trying to get, and the books go there and back across the ages. Right, so got it here. My apologies. Fine. So we've got Jewish life trying to revive itself in Germany and Austria, but it's been far too difficult. Rabbi Shalom of Neustadt, who actually gets given the name Tsar as a prince. He's called a prince by his contemporaries. He really knows halacha. They add the name Tsar, and he starts to build up a new generation, because even though in 1340 we have the terrible massacres in Germany, and even though we have written them, we learned in the last year, the writings that every Jew must leave Germany. If you save one life from Germany, you've saved the entire world. This is one that we learned in the last time. Nevertheless, they still wanted to rebuild Jewish life in Germany, and we have a lot of them doing that. And one important person is the Maharil, born in 1365, passed away in 1427, Rabbi Yaakov Levi, in Mainz and Worms, and he takes the Minhag Ashkenaz. Minhag Ashkenaz, very, very important minhag. At last week's the Haftarah, it tells us that if you are Sephardi, or if you come from Frankfurt, then you stop at this point. In one of the books, it also says if you're Chabad, but I open up the Chabad Chumash and it says, no, we go along to the end. But there was this custom there. And the Maharil is the basis for the Ramah. The Ramah we will get to in a couple of weeks' time, but Rabbi Moshe Isserles. Rabbi Moshe Isserles writes the Ashkenazi gloss to the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, of course, is written by Rabbi Yosef Karom, who is a Sephardi. Rabbi Moshe Isserles, living in Krakow, writes the Ashkenazi gloss to it. Where is he basing his works on? He's basing his works on the Maharil, who is German. And that is where he is getting a lot of his influence from because of this. Bearing in mind at this point, what happened between 1420 and 1436? There was a war that took place, and I'm sure one of you is going to know exactly which one I'm talking about, between 1420 and 1436.
Come on, Ian. You'll know.
Ian? The Hussite War. The Hussite War was an internal war between the Christians and the Christians. And whenever you have these wars, it was about information. It was about education. It's about allowing people to learn to express themselves. And so during this time, of course, when you have one of these, who gets caught up? It is a Jewish community that gets caught up. But they rebuild the community by Rabbi Yom Tov Isserles, the Trumas Hadeshen, in 1455. He rebuilds the Jewish community. And what does he does? The Trumas Hadeshen is quite a famous one. I'm just going to pull up on the screen and I'll be able to share it with you. The right screen, we just get up here, make sure we get the right one. No, not him. Let's get the right one, not him. Make sure we get the right one. No, not him. I'm just going to share with you a screen here now of the Maharil, the last rabbi I just spoke about. Very unprofessional. I've used Wikipedia. It's actually terrible. Rabbi Yaakov and Moshe Leib Molen, that's his grave in Worms, Germany. Last time I actually showed you a picture of me standing by that grave. He, 1365 to 1427, and he is the source. If you see putting here, his Minhagim is a source for Moshe Isserles' component on the Shulchan Aruch. And here is we got somebody from Germany influencing Poland, influencing what we call the Ashkenazim. Now, bearing in mind, when we say Ashkenaz, Ashkenaz is Germany, but the name Ashkenaz means Germany, but the main minhag of Ashkenaz is written down in Poland. But the next one we have the Trumas Hadeshen. Let's make sure we put up the right one for the Trumas Hadeshen. No, he's not the Trumas Hadeshen. No, that's not the Trumas Hadeshen. No. These are all the rabbis that we're supposed to be looking at. None of them is the Trumas Hadeshen. No, well, if we don't have the Trumas Hadeshen, then you're going to have to just take it from me. But the Trumas Hadeshen writes a number of responsa. The word Deshen, because the Trumas Hadeshen is the clearing out of the ashes from the temple every single day. They had to tidy out the ashes, but the Deshen is also the numerical value of 354. He writes 354 questions and the answers. He's quite unique in the fact he's probably one of the only ones to have written his own questions in order to pose the answers to them. Normally, you have what's called a shaila and tshuva, the shut. Somebody sends in the question, and then the rabbi writes the answer. But what happens if you're not getting the questions you want? You want to be able. He wasn't planting them, but he wanted to speak about these scenarios. So he writes the question himself, and then gives an answer, which was interesting in that later on when they get quoted in the commentary in the Shulchan Aruch, one Rav actually says, however, we need to understand that this was not a real life case scenario, and so therefore it's not necessarily binding in halacha, because there's an important point to consider. And we've had this once before. I told you the story that took place with me of a question that was asked of the Rav, and I thought the Rav had got it wrong. He'd given the right answer because he thought he was being asked the question by X, and he gave the answer, which turned out to be a wrong answer. But in fact, he's being asked the question by Y, in which case it was the right one. It was a question on nusach of davening. And he'd forgotten to say Mashiv Baruch. He thought he'd been asked by a Chabad, and he'd really been asked by Ashkenaz. So there is a difference in the nusach. So he gave the right answer to the person who asked the question. But there is a concept of having siyata d'shmaya, that if you ask the question, you're given the answer. Here, Trumas Hadeshen writes an answer to a question that he had not necessarily been asked. So later on, when a similar scenario came up, they wanted to use his, case law. Alan, Ian, you'll appreciate the fact you get a case law and you're going to quote it. We have this over here. We've got precedents, but the commentator writes we can't take it as precedence because it wasn't an absolute scenario, and so therefore it's not precedence. He's written an answer, but it's not an absolute reference because it didn't have the same scenario, which was a fascinating way of looking at something. How was the answer given to a halachic question? But want to jump a little bit more further east, because at that point we have also in 1455 Sultan Muhammad II conquers Constantinople. So right in the middle of the century that we're in, he conquers Constantinople. And what's the first thing the Sultan is going to do when he conquers Constantinople? What's going to be the top of his agenda?
The Jews.
Pardon, Alan?
The Jews.
What about the Jews?
Expel.
Yeah. Get rid of them.
Oi, you got a chip on your shoulder.
Just the opposite.
He opens the doors to the Jews. Anyone who had any sense knew that if they want their economy to prosper, they have to have the Jews. Have a look at Spain and what happened to their economy from 1492 onwards. It went downhill. Where did the Jews go mainly? Their closest place. Hello. Their closest place. Barbara, we're saying hello to you. The closest place that they had somewhere to go was, of course, Holland. What happened to the economy of Holland? Skyrockets. They open up the first boursa, the first stock exchange. The Jews are good for business. So in 1455, when the Sultan he conquers Constantinople, he opens the door to Jews, and he has a physician, a Jewish physician. His name is Yaakov. What do you have if you've got a Jewish physician? What does a patient speak about to the doctor? Not about what hurts, about his finances. Yaakov becomes his finance minister and is able to put into place that the Jews not only are welcomed in, but that they are given a place of importance. And they get a chief rabbi. Quite right, we speak about this week, a man by the name of Rabbi Moshe Kapsali. They call him the Chacham Bashi, the chief Chacham, the chief rabbi, from 1420 to 1495. He is a dynamic leader. But there are two issues that he has at this time. Number one was the Karaite community. We've looked at them before. The small community, they were quite a small community at this point, who only accept the Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah, and none of the rabbinic, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, none of the oral that goes with them. They are a small Jewish community in Jerusalem. At that point, the main Jewish community are Italian and Sephardic. The Karaites come along, they cause a little bit of problems. They get moved off, and Moshe Kapsali has a few problems with them, but his main issue here is the fact that there are Jews in the Jewish community in Jerusalem who are suffering terrible financial hardship. Israel at that point is under whom? Middle of the 15th century. Who rules Israel?
The Ottomans.
Not yet.
Ah,
Not yet.
the Romolex.
Based out of Egypt.
They're from Egypt, yeah.
And the Mamelukes and the Ottomans do not see eye to eye. They hate each other's guts. If you go along to the eastern, and if you go along to Caesarea, and that area, you'll find the different lookouts that were built, and we can see how they were developed as the time went by. But the Jewish community in Israel is under Egyptian rule. They are a very small Jewish community, mainly Italian and Sephardic. The Germans come along there, but the Jews don't want them. German Jews, the Italian and Sephardic do not want them because they don't have enough to feed them. Rabbi Moshe Kapsali starts to raise money. He sends that money along to the Jews in Jerusalem. What does that mean? It's treason. He's helped out Jews who are living under Egyptian rule when he is under Turkish rule.
Yeah.
And he gets into a lot of trouble for it. It's not the last time that happened. But we have a famous example of this with Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's living in Russia, who also sends money to the Jewish community in Israel. At that point, of course, they were under the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans didn't get on with the Russians. So when he sent money from Russia to Israel, he got, bearing in mind, when you send money to Israel, you're in trouble because they were always under a different empire. So in this point in our history at the moment, in the mid-15th century, they're under the Egyptians or the Mamelukes. The Jews are doing well in Turkey, Constantinople, and when he sends them money along, he gets into trouble. Because of they use this in order to have a go at him, and he sent a letter to Rabbi Yosef Kolon, who was the one of the main rabbis in Italy. And for some reason, we don't know why, Rabbi Kolon takes it at face value, and he sends a messenger back to tell Rabbi Kapsali that he has to stand down. The messenger who takes it back sees Rabbi Kapsali and he's totally embarrassed. He says, "There's no way." He understands that this has been a little bit of not a coup d'etat, but a besmirching campaign. He refuses to hand the letter over. 2 years later, Rabbi Moshe Kapsali finds out about this, and he writes back to Rabbi Kolon in Italy asking him, "Why did you do what you did?" They make shalom, but there is one here. I would just need to open up because at the end of his life, here we go. Here's Rabbi Moshe Kapsali. And let's get down here. So the chief rabbi, he calls on the leaders of the community. He says, please, he read the letter from Rabbi Joseph Kolon, who is in Italy. They were horrified. And why was he misled by these few troublemakers? And he writes a letter back to Rabbi Yosef Kolon. He tells him off. And there was a lot of agitation. A lot of rabbis came involved. Rabbi Kolon, who had written the letter, becomes convinced that he'd wronged him. He's grieved about it. And here's the brilliance of people recognizing the wrong. Whilst lying on his deathbed, he sent his son, Rabbi Peretz, to Constantinople to personally ask Rabbi Kapsali's forgiveness. Rabbi Kapsali welcomed the son of his opponent with fatherly affection, was moved by the gesture. He was sorry to hear that Rabbi Kolon was so ill, and he tried his best to befriend Rabbi Kolon's son and bestow many favors upon him. So we need to understand that here you've got somebody who was rightly wronged, who was rightly aware, he was aware of the fact that he had been wronged, grievously wronged. When the son comes along to ask me, a deathbed confession, what sort of good is that going to do me? Of course he confessed, he's about to die. He hadn't realized until that point how badly he'd done what was wrong. When the son makes a journey, and bear in mind a journey from Italy to Israel is a long one, as we'll get to in a minute. it can take you a long, long time to get there. Rabbi Kapsali forgives him, calls him in, and tries to make peace with him. But before I get on to Spain itself and what happens with the expulsion, I want to look at one rabbi who most of you should know of, Rabbi Ovadia Bar Tanura. The Bar Tanura wine is named after the area where he comes from. From 1455 till 1520, he's in Italy. He, of course, has to flee in 1492, except he goes a little bit earlier. He sees what's happening. He leaves in 1486. So, Ralph, you're the good at maths. From 1455, he was born. He left in 1486. How old is he?
29.
We all agreed with that?
Say the figures again. I think it was 31, but let's just say the figures again.
It's 31, even though you didn't hear it. 1455 to 1486. It's 31. The reason why I want you to know that, he's already written a commentary on the entire 6 orders of the Mishnah. The Bar Tanura is the commentary on the Mishnah. You want a commentary on the Chumash? You take Rashi. You want a commentary on the Mishnah? You take the Bar Tanura. He's finished it by the time he's 31 years old.
Incredible.
You're easily impressed.
It's not that I'm impressed. It's the question I ask of myself. And when it's all over and done with, my Yemru, what are they going to say? What have you left behind? No one knows when that last breath is going to come. None of us know what tomorrow's going to bring. None of us know what this afternoon's going to bring. Were my life to end at 1 o'clock today? Well, it didn't, because we're already past 1 o'clock, so I can say that. But what they're going to write in the epitaph? He, at the age of 31, had written a commentary on the entire 6 orders of the Mishnah. Conversely, Rabbi Kiva hadn't started to learn how to read Aleph Beis until he was 40 years old. So we should be inspired by those that do it early and encouraged by those who didn't manage to start until much later on in life. It's time for all of us. But in 1486, Rabbi Ovadia Bar Tanura starts to make a journey to Eretz Yisrael. It takes him 18 months to get there. He writes an extensive letter about his journey, and I just want to pull up. You can get to these yourself. They're quite easy to get to, but I went longer. Let's move that out of the way. Make sure we get the right one. There, Barbara. Let's get that one. Rabbi Ovadia di Bar Tanura. We'll get the letter that he writes. So he goes longer. He leaves in the 4th month, the fast day of Tammuz. So he sets out on a fast day, goes from Naples in a large ship with 9 of the Jews, 5 days. They get to Palermo in Sicily. There are 850 Jewish families living in one street, situated in the best part of town. Artisans, coppersmiths, ironsmiths, porters, peasants. They were despised by the Christians and they're obliged to wear a red piece of cloth on their garment. Rings a bell, this? This is in 1487. Then he's going along there. He's in Sicily. The badge is about the size of a gold coin. The royal tax fall heavily on them. They work for the king at any employment that's given, etc. But the synagogue of Palermo has not its equal in the whole world. I believe it's since been destroyed. The stone pillars in the outer courtyard are encircled by vines such as I have never seen. I measured one of them, and it was a thickness of 5 spans. The vestibule has 3 entrances, a porch, large chairs to rest, splendid fountain. He goes on and on. The scrolls of the law are ornamented with crowns and pomegranates to the value of 400 gold pieces. In the synagogue, there is a teva, which is the bimah, where they recite their prayers. There are 5. They employed 5 chazonim in the shul in Palermo. He then goes along. They would, I don't know whether we like this one or not. When anybody dies, the coffin is brought to the vestibule and the ministers hold the funeral services. If he is a distinguished man, specially learned, the coffin is brought into the synagogue, and a scroll of law is taken out and placed in the corner of the ark, while the coffin is placed in the opposite that corner. If they're not especially learned, I don't know what happens to them. But he's in Palermo. He gives a drosh on Shabbos. He stays there. He wants to be able to leave. He's struggling to get to leave, and he goes along. He goes to Rhodes. He's going along to Rhodes now. Favorable winds. They then go back. They're in a storm. They're going along. He goes along time after time again. He goes through. It's fascinating to read. And if I was you, you can go on it. It's on the Chabad.org website. Put in Rabbi Avadia, and you go through his entire story. Not many Jews are left in Rhodes. 22 families subsist on vegetables. They don't have bread or meat. No wine. They don't want to get into an argument with the Greeks. When they buy anything in the market, they touch nothing that belongs to the Greeks. They allow their hair to grow long and are beautiful in appearance. And the women occupy themselves with handiwork. He then gets to Alexandria in Egypt, and he is looked after by a wealthy man. Bit by bit, he's 7 days there. 12 days before Purim, they get to Cairo, and here we get the Karaites again. 700 Jewish families in Cairo, 50 Samaritans, called the Kuthites, and 150 are the Karaites. We've got 150 Jewish families in Egypt, in Cairo, of Karaites. The rest are our fellow Jews. Notice he refers to the Karaites, and the rest are our fellow Jews. From his perspective, the charism has changed so much, he doesn't even include them in the regular set of Jews, and he's got a little bit of them. And they go to Mount Gerizim. We've got the Samarites, the Samaritans, and they still, this is the Samaritans. They pretty much branched off from Judaism at the time of the origins of Christianity. But eventually, he comes along, he gets to this week's Sedra. I also get to the cave. In Gaza, he sees the ruins of the buildings that Samson pulled down. You can't see those anymore. And in Hebron, he gets along to the cave of Machpelah, over which a mosque has been built that's still there today. The kings of the Arabs come to daven, but Jew nor Arab is not allowed to go there. Nowadays, Jews are allowed to go along there. He finally gets to Jerusalem, Erev Pesach in 5248. That is 1488 is when he gets on to Pesach. He gets on to Jerusalem. There are about 4,000 families. 70 Jewish families are the poorest class that they are there. And he writes something important. In my opinion, an intelligent man versed in political science might easily raise himself to be the chief of the Jews as well as the Arabs. For among all the inhabitants, there is not a sensible man who knows how to deal kindly with his fellow men. Rabbi Avadia becomes that person. He gets rid of some of the crazy taxes, and he is able to be a leader of the Jewish community in Jerusalem. That letter, I've just pulled out snippets of it, is one of the best accounts we have of Jewish life as he's going through the whole way along. He's going from Spain through to Israel. He goes via Italy, Greece, Egypt, and then gets along to Israel, gives us a snapshot of the Jewish communities along the way. We see poverty, we see wealth, we see integration, we see total assimilation and absolute ghettoizing, where they are totally separate from the communities around them, such as we had in Rhodes in Greece. They didn't want to be part and parcel of it. Taking a snapshot of Jewish life at any part of our history, I reckon we would find the same thing. Take a snapshot of Jewish life now. Go to just America if you want. You will have those who are totally assimilated and those who have nothing to do with anything. You've got abject poverty and absolute wealth. You've got those who are able to be part and parcel of the establishment, and those who won't be seen dead speaking in English, or what the Americans call English. You take that and you place it anywhere you go. But here we've got a contemporary account of a man who ended up becoming in essence, the chief rabbi of the Jews of Jerusalem in the 15th century. And he's telling us the more things change, the more they stay the same. When we speak with the children, when would you have loved to live? Which part of our history? Some say, it'd been amazing to be the times of Shlomo Melech and Solomon, the building of the temple. Wouldn't it have been amazing? Yeah, okay, fine. It would have been no different to now, because you are who you are regardless of when you live. It's, if only I'd been then. You're not, we're here now. And going through the history from time to time, what really inspires me is that nothing's really changed. It's just the people have to learn how to deal with it. And one of the ones that they deal with is 1440. What happens in 1440? In Europe, in a city that is sometimes Germany, sometimes France. Jonathan, you're still muted.
Is it Strasbourg?
No, not Strasbourg, although you're very close to Strasbourg.
Basel?
Cologne. Cologne.
I'll give you a picture. Who's this guy over here?
Right. Basel? No.
Nope.
Luxembourg?
I think we were in Luxembourg, but this guy here, Johannes Gothenburg. Johannes Gutenberg.
Oh, Gutenberg, the printer.
What?
Printing press.
You've been to the printing.
Printing press. You can see it over there.
Yes.
That's the printing press. In
Yeah.
1440, contrary to what we might like to believe, he wasn't Jewish. But he doesn't invent the printing press. He invents a style of printing press in Europe. If you go along to the British Library, I did do that. Fascinating bits and pieces we have there. The Arabs in the height of Muslim Spain, and especially if you go further over to the Arabs in Arabia area, they'd been printing on copper. The Chinese had discovered paper much earlier than that. But as far as Europe was concerned, which then gave rise to the mass produce, 1440, Johannes Gutenberg, the Gutenberg press. And whilst he was most famous for the Christian Bible, he didn't get much business from that. His main business that he gets is from printing the Jewish Bible, because it's the Jews who are interested. And then you have the Talmud. The Vilna edition of the Shas we're going to get is not until the 1800s. It's going to be a while to come until we get to the edition of the Shas that we know. But every Jewish household would have wanted a Chumash. Christian households weren't allowed them, of course. Round the corner to that statue is actually a cathedral we get to, and it's one of the cathedrals that has the very anti-Semitic thing in front, when you've got justice and you've got the Jew and the Christian. The Jew is the blinded one. The Christian. Ian, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I thought you were going to refer to Wittenberg about the Jew style, but I know what you're talking about.
Actually, I'm not sure the one you're talking about, but they've got the one there which portrays the Jew as being blind to justice with the broken tablets, whereas the Christianity rising up out of it. So ironically, in a time which was very anti-Semitic, the invention or his invention made it so much easier for Jews. Christians at that point, before the Reformation, they weren't allowed to. You weren't allowed to really print the Bible for use by the masses. But it wasn't, there was another invention at this point, Jacob's staff. Anybody know what I'm talking about when I say Jacob's staff?
We're an ignorant lot, aren't we?
Right, invented by Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, who died in 1344. It is a quadrant. And the astrolabe, Ralph, you must have used them in order to figure out where you are on the oceans.
Sextant.
Yes, but this was a quadrant. Before they got that, they had a quadrant and the astrolabe, both Jewish inventions. The quadrant used to measure the angular distance between the celestial objects, was called Jacob's staff, was invented by Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, a great-grandson of Ramban Nachmanides, and which takes us to the last part of the century, 1492. When it was in 1492 when Columbus set sail on the ocean so blue. Was Columbus Jewish or was he not? There's a lot of discussion about it. Before we get to whether Columbus was Jewish, there's one of those that we need to speak about, which I have not yet. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel, spoken about Bartanur, Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel in 1492 also. We are kicked out of Spain, but Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was the royal treasurer to Ferdinand and Isabella. They wanted Don Yitzchak to apostatize. They wanted him to convert to Christianity in order to avoid expulsion. He was important to them. He lent them vast sums of money. Because of that, they were able to, the reconquisition of Granada, they were able to, they finally gets rid of Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula because of the money donated by a Jew to them. Bearing in mind, by 1391, we'd lost all our money. By 1420, most of the bankers in Spain were Jewish. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel in the 1480s lends money to the monarchs in order for them to consolidate Spain as being a total Christian country, getting rid of the Muslims. They turned on the Jews and they expelled them all. However, they wanted the important people to stay, and a number who had actually did apostatize. Yehuda Abarbanel, born 1465, Don Yitzchak's son, the elder son, he was a private physician to Ferdinand and Isabella. He was an absolute Talmud Chacham, and he was in his 20s, already known as one of the greatest Jewish philosophers in Renaissance Italy. They begged him to convert. The previous, they used us as their carrot, basically, Rabbi Avram Siniorim. You know, we've got the seniors in the community, related from them, but he was a chief tax farmer who was the Rabbi de la Corte. He converted together with his sons and his son-in-law. They hoped that he would convince the Abarbanels to convert as well. They refused. Ironically, Rabbi Avram Signora had a previous job. He had been the shadchan for Isabel and Ferdinand. He brought them together. And then they wanted to kick him out. They convinced him, and we're not here to judge. They convinced him, and he did it. Bearing in mind, let's just go back a couple of centuries, at the time of Rambam, when we've got the Jews under Muslim rule, who are being told either apostatize or die. The Sephardic rabbis, the Ashkenazi rabbis told them, give up your life, and Rambam says, how dare you write that? Let them accept Islam, and we learned about those that publicly accepted Islam, but privately lived their life as Jews. And that's what those who converted in Spain did the same time. Rabbi Sinyo was 80 by the time he converted in 1492, and he passed away a year later. Rabbi Sinyo, together with the Abarbanel, had gone 3 times to Ferdinand and Isabella, asked them to change their mind. They refuses to do so. What do they do instead? They got his grandson, Yehuda's son, kidnapped and converted, which they think, this is going to help them. What does they do? They find out about it. Yehuda, Don Yitzchak's son, the physician to the king, learns of it. He sends his 1-year-old son, Yitzchak, to Portugal. The person that has discovered all of this was Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu of Cornell University. Have any of you heard of him? You know his son.
Netanyahu.
Bibi Netanyahu's father was a professor of Cornell University, and he wrote the definitive work on the life of Don Yitzchak Abarbanel and of the child that escaped. Unfortunately, the Ferdinand and Isabella found out about it. They got in touch with the King of Portugal. Jonathan, I'm sure you know, who was the King of Portugal in 1492?
You're
Can't
muted.
hear you. You're muted.
I'm glad you asked me that question. Arnold the 13th.
John II, he kidnapped the young boy. He was baptized and raised by Dominicans and never went back to his family. Yehuda, the father, makes a poem. It's called Tuluna al-Azman, The Travails of Time. It was written about 11 years after the boy was kidnapped. And some extracts from English. Time with his pointed shafts has hit. My heart split, my gut laid open my entrails, landed me a blow that will not heal, knocked me down, left me in lasting pain. Yes, time, my bear, my wolf, ate at my heart, cleft it in two and cut it into pieces. And jumping out a bit, 2 sons were born to me, 2 splendid sons, 2 precious, noble, handsome boys. The younger I named Samuel. Time, my watchful overseer, confiscated him, struck him down just 5 years old, and all that grew from him was misery. The elder I called Yitzchak Abarbanel, after the quarry where I myself was hewn, after one of Israel's greats, his grandfather, a man who was like King David, a lamp unto the west. He was just 1 year old, alas, when time, the enemy ever at my heels, took him away. And he goes on, and he beseeches his son, tells him about his family and his heritage. We never find him again. We hear no more of the son who was kidnapped. But was Columbus, can't remember his name, was Columbus Jewish? There are a number of clues that tells us very possible he was. But I want us to bear in mind at the moment, as my history professor told me it time and time again. You have a narrative, you look for the clues that fits into that narrative. This was an article written by a Frum historian who was convinced of the fact that Columbus has to be Jewish and finds bits and pieces that fit into it. However, it's highly likely that he was. Just before we do any further, I just want to share one thing with you. It is, nope, nope. This one here. This here is the Catalan Atlas. The Catalan Atlas was written by a Jew. It's called the Cresqui Atlas, and it was commissioned in 1376 by King Juan of Aragon, who gave it to King Charles VI of France, and it's still on display in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And here is his map of the world. By and large, maps were written by Jews because they had to bring, they were the merchants. If you were living, let's get us to, if you're in Spain, you're in Italy, the way to make an absolute fortune is to get a boatload of black peppercorns from the East, from Asia, and bring them along and sell them in the marketplaces of Spain and Italy. Sets you up for life. They write all of their maps. Here we've got England for some reason in purple, got Spain, Italy. We'll go along, we've got Eretz Yisrael and Egypt. And the map takes them the whole way across to the east.
Wow.
These were all, as I say, they were done by Jews. They invented the items that were needed to safely navigate the seas. Columbus makes sure that all of his staff are on the boat, the ship that's sailing off before nightfall on Tisha B'Av. And he writes time and time again in various bits and pieces. And he keeps his identity secret, most probably because nobody in 1492 wants to declare the fact that they may be descended from Marranos. And he writes in his diary there references to the Chumash. references to how the world is round. Many people might think, oh, back in the day, Columbus thought the earth was flat. No, he did not. Columbus knew very well, as did most people by the time it came to the 15th century, that the earth was round. And Columbus makes at least 4 references in his diary to one from Michelet, speaks of the earth's surface as being curved. Yeshaya, again, speaks about a spherical earth. Yeshaya 43:16, let's just pull this one up on the screen. This is one of my favorite ones of them. Yeshaya 43:16, thus says the Lord, who made a road through the sea and a path through mighty waters. And he quotes from Yeshaya, and he said this was a fulfillment of the Yeshaya's prophecy of the islands beyond the sea.
Hold on, he was talking about the crossing of the Red Sea.
No,
On that previous
not
quotation.
not necessarily.
I thought
Isaiah was speaking about all the Jews coming back across the oceans. We have a number of references to on that day the oceans will split and will go back.
okay.
Columbus is using them as reference to finding the Americas. Bear in mind, Columbus did not discover America. America had been there all along. Columbus was a European who got to America in 1492, and there probably been Europeans, if you can call them Europeans, there earlier as well. Where there's reference, probably the Vikings had already been over to
Eric the Red.
Huh?
Eric the Red.
Eric the Red.
He supported Man United. Yeah.
Simon Wiesenthal writes a book, Sails of Hope, the Secret Mission of Christopher Columbus, that he wanted to find the Jews of the East. In order, he thought they were from the 10 lost tribes and wanted to establish a Jewish homeland. In his diary, Columbus writes that on December 26, 1492, he writes, they will have found the gold mine, the spices in such quantities that within 3 years the sovereigns will prepare for and undertake the conquest of the Holy Land. All the profits of this, my enterprise, should be spent on the conquest of Jerusalem. Now, ostensibly, that's obviously speaking about capturing it for Christians from the Muslims. However, every time Columbus writes a letter, with the exception of the one he sends personally to Ferdinand and Isabella, at the top, there is what is undoubtedly a base hey writing within there. When he first writes to the king and queen, he says, you've sent out, he opens up his letter, you've kicked out his first letter, and thus having expelled all the Jews from all your kingdoms and dominions in the month of January, why on earth would Columbus write to his non-Jewish sponsors and tell them about kicking out the Jews? They know what they've done. This was part of his whole raison d'etre. He time and time again, he would seemingly do it. There is his final will and testament. He speaks about giving money to a Jew who was living at the entrance of the ghetto in Lisbon. 1/10 of his income, 1/10 Misa, to the poor, and provide an anonymous dowry for poor girls. So whether or not he was or he wasn't, I do not know. But in his book on geography, he writes a book on geography. It's in Seville, Historia Rerum Uquique Gestarium, whatever that means, history of all things and all deeds. All of his dates are calculated according to the Jewish calendar. This is the computation of creation of the world according to the Jews. From the birth of Avram until the Second Temple was destroyed 1,088 years, bang on. From the beginning of the world to this year, 1481, there were 5,241 years. Why would a Christian computate his diary according to the year of the Jews? Makes no sense whatsoever. The more cryptic one looks at Columbus's signature, which has confused many. I'm just going to, wait a second. That is Columbus's signature. What do cryptographers make on it? At the top, the S. It's Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh in Latin. The S, Sanctus. The next line, Sanctus Adonai Sanctus. Then Chesed Molei Hashem. The 3 lines of Kedusha, which if you go to the Spanish, the graves of Marrano Jews in Spain, they had that engraved on their tombstones. It means nothing else. Whether or not that is what it means, or whether or not.
Can you put it again, Rabbi? Can you just put
Sorry?
it up? Can you put it up again and then say what those 3 lines are while we can see it?
S Sanctus, S-A-S, Sanctus, Hashem Sanctus, Chesed Mola Oilam. Kindness fills the world. So it's Kodesh, Kodesh. On his letter, when he writes about the world, our Lord, who rescued Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, is present with the same wisdom and power as he had then. Them's be the facts. Put them as you want. However, I just want it. Sorry?
I say it's irresistible, isn't it?
It could be. But I just want to leave you with what I think is the most fascinating piece of writing written from the perspective of a Marrano watching an auto da fe. But before we go on any further, we have to remember that the Spanish Inquisition has no authority over a Jew. The Inquisition only has authority over Christians. And a Jew who stayed there, converted to Christianity, and now they were subject to the Inquisition, because if they were lapsed Christians, that's why they called them Marranos, because they were pigs. If you were Jewish, fine, figure out how we're going to live, we're going to kick you out. But the Inquisition had no authority over the Jews, only over Christians. The problem was that you couldn't live there as a Jew, so many apostatized and lived in abject fear for the next 400 to 500 years. Nachi was on a trip to Spain with the Rebbitzins, Barcelona, and their tour guide, Rabbi, name gone out of my head, said his mother rang him up. They've got a cleaner who was going, a Spanish cleaner who was going back to Spain to get married and couldn't wait, because once she gets married, the custom in their household is that the woman on Friday nights opens up the cupboard underneath the stairs and lights 2 candles and then puts them out again. She had no idea. She'd been working in the rabbi's house for years, had no idea. Didn't click the 2. But this is a piece of writing that was written from the perspective of a Marrano watching an auto da fe. Burning ground. Sorry, I'm going to need to share it with you. My apologies, I was supposed to share the screen. Burning ground, the humid heat, the crackling flames of an auto da fe, the smell of burning flesh. All around, the crowds are cheering, consumed with the religious fever, baying for the blood and the purity of their nation. Their blood-curdling cries resonating in my ears. The smoke hits my eyes. I could bear it no longer. I had to leave. How could it be? How could heaven allow these deeds, these horrific deeds of mere mortals? How could the ground not open itself up to accept this man, to let him rest? How could humanity ignore the death of this heroic man who paid the ultimate price? He's an example to us all. His courageous act, giving the strength to carry on, the strength to inspire me, to prepare me as a Marrano, to push me as a Jew upon the days ready to give my life. They may be the powerful ones pulling the strings, but they hold no sway over me, for I am stronger than they. So that is written from the perspective of a Marrano watching an auto da fe, authored by, anybody want to hazard a guess who it was authored by?
Columbus? No.
No, not Columbus.
No. Don't know.
Alan?
Can't think.
No?
Must be a rabbi.
Sorry?
It must be a rabbi.
No, not a rabbi.
Contemporary writer,
Yeah, contemporary writer.
not Primo Levi,
A
is it?
painter.
No. Primo Levi.
Yeah.
Not bad.
That's
No.
what
No. Chaya
No.
Brocha Lewis.
Sorry.
Chaya Brocha Lewis.
Fantastic. Of course.
Of course. Now it
Yeah.
makes sense. Now it makes sense.
Now it all comes back.
Anyway, gentlemen, that's the end of today. Next week, we will be doing the, we'll leave Spain alone because Jews have been kicked out of there. We're going to do it from the 1500 to 1600, the 16th century. Thursday, hopefully, we should be all right for the Chumash Shir at 12:30. But I'm hoping to have my nephew's bris at 10, but I still should be back for 12:30. Sorry? Nachie said I should do it at 1 just to be sure. So I'm going to do it at 1 o'clock. Just give me a little bit. So we're okay on Thursday, 1 o'clock instead of 12:30.
Fine.
All right, you? Yes, David.
Rabbi?
Sorry, David was just about to speak. Yeah, David?
Just to wish you Mazel Tov, first of all, on the
Thank you.
stuff. A couple of speculative questions. But you've mentioned before several times about countries that have Jews and financially are secure, and those that kick the Jews out aren't. How do we count for Germany post 1945? An anomaly.
No. Blame the Americans.
And the Americans, okay.
They gave them, well,
Yeah.
as it goes, it was the, it goes to the discussion amongst the Israeli generals. They were discussing, there were real problems. Basically, poverty was bringing them to the brink of war. So one of them said, you know what we need to do? We need to declare war on America. So well, how's that going to help? So we could declare war on America, they beat us, and then they rebuild. It says, yeah, but what happens when we win?
And we beat them, yes. Right. My other question is,
David, but to answer your real question, just go back slightly earlier. I mean, there's two sides of the coin as well. Whenever the finances go down, they blame the Jews. Just have a look at what happened pre-19.
well, absolutely. My other is extremely speculative, because I've just read that Saib Erekat has passed away from coronavirus, and I wonder if he might do some good in the other place if he were to meet Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. Maybe they could sort a few things out for us.
No, because Rabbi Saib Erekat is going down, and Rabbi's going up. Do you know what? Do you know which doctor works in that Hadassah hospital?
Which doctor? You mean a specific one?
Saib Erekat's daughter is a doctor in that hospital.
Wow.
In the terrible apartheid Israel,
Yeah.
she was given a job in the hospital, which then treated her father for a couple of months. He's been there, then passed away.
The world doesn't know these facts, do they?
Jonathan, you're about to ask. Sorry.
What was the name of the atlas from 1375? I was amazed. No Radlers on it. I saw that.
Was it not on it? Not been discovered yet, Jonathan. Columbus hasn't got there yet.
It's written by a Jew called Yehuda Kreskes, Cresques. But if you Google it, just search for the Catalan Atlas.
See.
ATAN, Catalan.
Oh, the Catalan Atlas.
Yeah, it was put together by Yehuda Kreskes, Cresques.
It was so impressive, the atlas from 700 years ago, or 650. It was all out. The dimensions were a bit square, but the colors and the design of it was all right. It was just brilliant.
We sometimes forget that people that went before us had to use their brains.
Just say that again. I'm sorry.
The people who came before us had to use their brains.
Exactly.
They weren't able to just go on to go on. Although, to quote Rabbi Sachs, of blessed memory, says, Waze, Google Maps have saved many a marriage. But it's all right, I know. But in the olden days, they used their brains and they used their ingenuity and they used that in order to build, pyramids of Giza, the Beis Hamikdash, to draw maps without being able to step out from it all. Have a map from England all the way over to far East India. Phenomenal.
when you think of Marco Polo, he obviously he's not Jewish, but what he did, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it was fantastic year.
Marco Polo was Jewish.
Oh, he's one of the polos. Yes, the Pollocks. It was short. For
The
Pollock.
Polo's from Leeds, yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
It
you
was
very
excellent.
much.
Very
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
All the
Yeah,
best.
bye. Thank
Great
you.
year.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
4:45. Mincha, 4:45.
Yes, minute and quarter to 4. Yes.
Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah.